What's good, YouTube? What is good, people? Thank you for coming with me on this journey as we essentially document pretty much the collapse of the American empire. American, you meaning like the United States of America. That's pretty much what I've gathered in my year and a half of, no, almost 2 years now of going through kind of the more recent history and then of the United States and just history in general, and like aligning that with my own experience. We're probably witnessing the collapse of the American Empire, and this has been going on since before I was born. I didn't really notice it until COVID. I noticed it here and there, but I didn't put the words to the whole movie here, I guess, if you want to put it that way. I didn't have the script to the movie, but I noticed things from my own perspective here and there when I was growing up, but I didn't have the perspective to really put the script to the movie, I guess, if you want to put it that way. But here I have this article that me and a buddy on Discord were talking about the labor force participation in the United States, and I didn't really have much. I didn't really have much other than my own experience to really kind of to have like to add to the conversation, I guess. So I just kind of did some research, and I found this article that I thought was really interesting, and this taught me a lot of things, and I think it will open up a conversation about this topic. So let me take you into my screen here. I'll record my screen, and then I'll do a little bit of editing here. Screen recording now. I'll do a little bit of editing. Hopefully I can get this recording that I'm doing on my camera right now. Maybe I can put it in the corner or something, like some people do on YouTube videos that I've watched that do things like this where they talk about articles. I don't really know how to perfect that. I've tried it out on a couple of videos that I didn't post. I just tried it out as practice, and it didn't really turn out like I wanted to. But those were kind of just practice. This is a topic I actually really want to cover, so I'm just going to post it regardless. But let's just get into it here. What is the labor force participation rate formula? How to calculate? That was actually my first question when I was talking to my friend. I was like, how is this calculated? And here it is, labor force participation rate formula. Labor force participation rate equals the employed plus the unemployed divided by the civilian non-institutionalized population. And then they'll get into what that means, each component of that. They'll get into that in this article, so let's just start reading here. The labor force participation rate shows the number of people seeking work or working expressed as a percentage of the total population. So already right there, you see that this is a skewed statistic. The labor force participation rate shows the number of people seeking work or working. That's already a skewed statistic, expressed as a percentage of the total population. What about those who are unemployed and not necessarily seeking work? What are the people that are unemployed and are addicted to opiates right now? And they'll discuss that later in the article, so let's just keep reading. Learn how to calculate the labor force participation rate formula and why the rate changes. Definitions of labor force participation rate. The labor force participation rate measures the amount of labor in an economy. This was interesting to me. Note, labor is one of the factors of production. The other three factors of production are natural resources, capital, and entrepreneurship. I found that interesting. So the LFPR, labor force participation rate, shows how many people over the age of 16, aside from those living in institutions, are working or looking for work. In December 2021, the seasonally adjusted labor force participation rate was 61.9%, meaning 61.9% of the labor force was participating in work, remaining steady from November 2021 rates. So we're just started February 2022 now. So this was from December of 2021. And they give you some numbers here. These are in thousands, so these are essentially millions. 262 million of total civilian non-institutional population above the age of 16, 262 million. The labor force, 162 million. Employed, 155 million. So eligible labor force, 162 million. Employed, 155 million of those people that are eligible are employed. Unemployed, about 6 million, so like about 5% in terms of the eligible population. And not in labor force, 99 million out of the whole population that's eligible. So those are kind of the numbers, and now let's keep reading. The labor force participation rate formula works like this. Take the total labor force, employed plus unemployed, divided by the total civilian non-institutionalized population. So the people that aren't in jail over 16. So how it works. To calculate it, you must understand how they define labor force. The Bureau of Labor and Statistics is the federal agency that creates the monthly job reports on the labor force and its participation rate. So that's huge. All of these numbers that we're seeing and all of these, all of these kind of analyses that are done by the Bureau of Labor and Statistics, and that's a federal agency. So, there's probably more people being paid to analyze the labor force than there is like working. That is not, obviously that's not true, but sometimes, like, just as a joke, it seems like that sometimes. Or maybe just concerning my perspective on what I'm doing. Maybe that's why it seems like that to me. So the labor force is everyone classified as either employed or unemployed. The employed is a group made up of civilian non-institutional population above age 16 who in the last week worked at least an hour or more as paid employees. So those are considered employed. It also counts, so technically I'm employed because last week I was working. Technically I'm employed. So it also counts as those who worked 15 or more hours as unpaid workers in a family-owned business or farm. I mean, this isn't family-owned, but it's formerly known as an essential business. No, I'm just kidding. So each worker is only counted once, even if they hold 2 or more jobs. The employed also includes those who had jobs or businesses that didn't work that week due to vacation, illness, strike, training, maternity or paternity leave, another family reason. So basically people they, for whatever, they're working but didn't work that week because they're on vacation, they were sick or whatever. The unemployed includes those age 16 or older who are available for work and who have actively sought a job within the past 4 weeks but aren't employed. It includes people who have been laid off and are waiting to be recalled for a job. Okay, I'm going to skip that important notice. I'll put the article in the description if you want to read it yourself, which I think this is huge. This whole website honestly is probably, if you're interested in economics and some of these statistics, it's probably a pretty good website. So I'm going to post that in the description below. The civilian non-institutional population refers to anyone living in the U.S. who is 16 or older, with the exception of those who are in the military and those who live in nursing homes, which is interesting. A lot of people actually do live in nursing homes, and that number is going to increase over time. I just worked in one. That number is going to increase over time, just looking at demographics. But nursing homes, prisons, jails, mental hospitals, the number of people at mental hospitals is probably going to increase. Or juvenile correctional facilities. The number of people in these type of facilities will probably increase as well. Because that's a whole nother video to go into, but let's just keep going on this. The history of the labor force participation rate. This was interesting to me. The U.S. labor force participation rate rose from 58.6% in January 1948 to a peak. So it was 58.6% in January of 1948. I think that's the year that they started keeping this statistic. So it rose to a peak of 67.3% in January of 2000. That's a pretty big, that's almost a 10% increase. I think that's like what, an 8.7% increase or something like that. If I'm doing my math, like my quick math here, if I'm doing my quick math right, 8.7%. This dramatic increase was caused by a few demographic trends, which on this channel we've discussed. First, the big boom of babies born after World War II became old enough to enter the workforce. So that's why it rose over that time from 1948 to 2000. And at the same time, this is huge. And we know this in the mgtow sphere. A higher percentage of women sought careers. So in the 1990s, more Latino workers entered the workforce. I mean, do you really, to me, that's like, I think the first two things are like way bigger than the Latino workers entering the workforce. Like, I don't know why they separate it out that way. Like, if they're American, they're American men. Like, I don't really care if you're Latino, if you're Nigerian, if you're like British, if you're French, Australian, like Nicaraguan or whatever. There was a fine chick from my work. She was Nicaraguan. She was pretty cool. But okay, let's keep going. After the 2000 peak, 3 recessions over the next 20 years caused many people to drop out of the labor force, some permanently. And this is interesting. I heard about this, but I never really attributed much like importance to that until this COVID. Like after this COVID, I realized, okay, recessions can really derail people's lives and cause them to drop out of the workforce permanently, as this article says. The recessions coincided with the retirement of baby boomers and other demographic trends. At least they're hip to that. The retirement of baby boomers and other demographic trends. The writer of this article is hip to that stuff. The 2001 recession lowered the labor force participation rate to 65.9%. Still pretty high. In April 2004, it never returned to the 2000 peak. 2008 financial crisis sent the participation rate down a couple of percentage points to 62.4%. By September 2015. By January 2020, it had only risen to 63.4%, which isn't bad. That's not bad, especially given the history of the whole like tracking of the statistics. So right before COVID, it rose to 63.4%. So the 2020 recession sent the labor force participation rate down to 60.2% because they literally said, okay, guys, don't work. So that makes sense. In April 2020, as millions of people were laid off or furloughed, I mean, that's being generous. A lot of people just left. So this was the lowest level since January 1973 when it was 60%. And remember, 1971 is when they went off the gold standard and inflation started increasing huge amounts. So it's not surprising that the lowest level the lowest level in a while was in 1973. That makes a lot of sense. I was post Vietnam War and post floating currencies right after that. So moving on, below you can see the seasonally adjusted labor force participation rate over the last 2 decades. Shows a massive drop since the financial crisis, etc., etc. So this is a pretty cool chart. This is actually a really cool chart that I might just kind of enlarge or try to do, because this is actually really interesting. I didn't look at this whole chart, but this shows you since calculated, this just puts it in graph form. This is very interesting. Huge rise from the 70s onward, as floating currencies, women start jumping into the workforce and men are leaving. But see, look at how steeply it rises from 1975 to 1980. Look at that steep rise right there. That's very interesting. Very interesting. And then it starts declining after since 2000. Yeah, like they said, it's just been declining pretty much. And then you have that sharp decline because of COVID, and then it kind of went back up again. Interesting. So why the participation rate declined? The Great Recession saw high levels of unemployment, but researchers found that even as the labor market recovered in the decade after the crisis, many workers who left jobs never returned even once jobs became more available. That makes a lot of sense. Demographic changes affected the labor force even before the recession. Let's look at this note. According to the Council of Economic Advisors, another government agency that kind of analyzes the economy, half of the decline in labor force participation rate between 2007 and 2014 was due to the aging of America. So even prior to COVID, you kind of see that. And that's like one of the big trends that I think is even affecting it now and is going to affect it more later. The aging of America. And then with less immigrants coming in, like I was talking with my buddy, with less immigrants coming in because America is not as. It still is kind of attractive to immigrants, like mainly due to economics, but that's diminishing. And you could say quote unquote freedoms and stuff. I think that freedoms and whatnot, I think that was overblown in the beginning. But now, even with all this COVID shit, that's becoming less and less of a thing. And the economics, which I think was the main reason why immigrants came here, like the economic opportunity, that's declining with one, inflation, and two, just the general trajectory of the economy. Like it's not really producing. It's not even the services part is kind of getting lower now. It's more like data driven. It seems like. So there's services, but I feel like it's changing from services to just more of like transfer of data. And we've gotten to that in other videos. We'll probably get into that in future videos. So as baby boomers reach retirement age, they leave the labor force, obviously. Some others stay home to care for ailing parents or spouses or claim disability, and that's actually pretty big. And I can't blame them. Can't blame them at all. Like even if you don't really have a disability, the fact that you can just get money from it, and then also your money is being inflated, especially as you get older, once you kind of realize the way society goes. Like I don't really blame these guys for not like wanting to work and just, collecting checks, man. Like the only bad thing about that is overall it like hurts people in the end. And even those people who are doing it now, unless they die within the next 10 to 20 years, it's probably going to affect them again, and it's going to affect their children if they had any. But as we know now, a lot of them, I mean, at least maybe you guys already knew, but as I'm learning now, a lot of them didn't even have children. So it is what it is, and future people might not have children either. But yeah, so baby boomers had a major impact on the labor force participation rate because they represent such a large percentage of the population. This is also why it may never regain its past levels no matter how strong the job market is, and that's true. That's why the whole economy is going to change. That's one of the reasons, because even if we had the level of, like in terms of percentages, the level of employment that the boomers had, there's simply just not the same amount of people. So you just can't do the same amount of work. You can't produce the same amount of stuff. I mean, if we were producing stuff in the first place, we couldn't produce the same amount of stuff that they produced, goods and services. There just won't be as much stuff because there's not as much people. So even if we did everything perfectly, we still wouldn't necessarily have the same economy they did. Which is why I think it's changing largely to data, because a lot of that stuff people don't even know how to do anymore. So now people are like buying data to figure out, like to kind of, what's the word? Like they're buying data in order to like try to fill in the gaps of just what's not really there anymore. That's how it seems like to me, but my perspective may change as I get older. So see, this is important, and I'm probably just going to end with this because this video is getting pretty long. mgtow essentially here, they reference mgtow. Men ages 25 to 54 leaving the labor force. A significant number of working age men have also left the labor force. In 1954, 98% of men aged 25 to 54, I'm 25 right now, were in the labor force, 98%. By 2017, that had fallen to 88%, and that's generous. I don't think they've counted the men who have just dipped. Like, I don't think they've counted those men. a lot of them, maybe a little bit, but I think there's a lot they haven't counted. So 88%, that's probably generous. So this is one of the lowest rates of prime age men in all developed countries, 88%. Like, I really think they have another thing coming if they think those numbers are low. They have another thing coming. The drop-off is worse among men without a college degree. Essentially me, even though I went to college for 5+ years, technically I don't have a degree. The percentage of people with at least a college degree rose from 33% in 1947. You see how a college degree wasn't needed back in the day? Like 33% of people had a college degree back then, and we had a stronger economy then than we do now in terms of just real economy, like what we were producing. Granted, 1947 was right after World War II, so I can't necessarily say that we had a stronger economy then than we do now, but in the couple decades after we did. So it rose from 33% to 84% in 2000. 84%. And then remember that women started outnumbering men in terms of getting a college degree in colleges. Women started outnumbering men in colleges by 1981. So like this 84%, the amount of people with a college degree that rose 84%, that makes a lot of sense because, a lot of these women were getting college degrees. So, that's interesting. With less demand for non-degreed men, the wages are much lower. I think that is probably going to start changing. Wages fell by 15% for these men between 1973 and 2016. And don't even talk about real wages. Don't even get me started on real wages. When we talk about inflation, every time I see a 1970 number, I always think that. I always think inflation. Many manufacturing jobs that these men relied on have either been outsourced or replaced by technology. And outsource is a big thing. Replaced by technology I don't think that's as big as people think. But outsource, I think that's huge. Okay, no, discouraged workers, I'll let y'all read that if you want. And jobs leaving the market, we already know about that. Opioid dependency, I thought this was interesting. Poor health and disability. That's kind of like what the healthcare network might end up trying to take care of. We'll see if that ends up happening. It might be like 5 to 10 years if it does at all. But I'll let y'all read the rest. See, they got more interesting articles out here. I just thought all that was interesting and I wanted to post it up here. And then, what do you guys think about this shit? If you're still watching 20+ minutes in here, what do y'all think about this? I thought it was very interesting. So let me know what you guys think. I'm gonna end the screen recording here. And that is recorded. And yeah, let me know what y'all think in the comments. Nice to talk to you guys again here. It's been a while. Hopefully I can do this a little bit more frequently, but man, the more I learn, the more I'm like, this is bigger than
immortal technique,
bigger than any of us, man. So hopefully these videos are still entertaining to y'all. They're not gonna fix anything necessarily. Maybe they might help fix some shit in your own life and like make your own life better. Hopefully, like they're making my life better just by making the videos and sharing what I've learned. But man, it's not like we're gonna fix any of this shit, man. So it is what it is. But alright, that's it for this video. I'll catch y'all later. Stay healthy and peace out.